Great. So now we're live. Welcome, everybody, to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from Eindhoven in the Netherlands, I've got Toby Newman.
Hello.
Toby, you're a lead of learning and development at Here Technologies,
Yes.
and you support a global organization of just under 10,000 people.
Yes.
And learning and development. So we're going to talk about that in a bit and all kinds of things. You've also got a personal work hobby / project called the Neverending Learner.
Yeah, in Dutch they call it a side hustle. I always find that's a very weird, because I'm not hustling. Yeah, because I'm, as you could probably tell from the accent, I'm not Dutch. Kind of a born and bred Londoner. So the kind of hustle sounds a bit kind of, but
right. So side hustle projects, but
yeah.
all in the same vein of learning, and we're really dive deeply into that today. But let's start with the first question. What does your virtual office look like, and what do you need to get your work done?
So let me just show you a little bit. So this is, at the moment, this is the office. So we're based in Eindhoven. Our office is a traditional office, but more and more we're more working remotely. So I have my office at home as well. We, in a sense, can work anywhere because we have VPN. We have all our work on the cloud. It's kind of a sad in a good way, and obviously I follow your hints and tips about working remotely, but technically I can work anywhere.
Okay, and so when would you work at your home office versus at the traditional office?
So I'd say my first kind of real taste of remote working was my previous company, where I first moved over to the Netherlands. I didn't know anybody. I was a bit kind of shy going into the office because I didn't really know. So I worked pretty much a year and a half at home because I was traveling a lot as well. But at that time, it was very much set up that most people work from the office. So it was a very lonely experience. Now, with the company I'm working for now, Here Technologies, we're set up for virtual, not necessarily at home, but virtual working. So we have WebEx Teams, we have basically everything Cisco has. We have Yammer, we have all the SharePoint sites and all. So basically anything you can think of to easily collaborate. And obviously with working with yourself, we're looking at some more virtual tools to make it a bit easier. But my general experience at the moment is I go to the office because my boss is also at the office and we chat a lot. And I'd say more and more I feel comfortable working at home. If I was to give you a percentage, maybe at the moment it's still 75% at home. Sorry, other way around.
At the office.
75% at the office, yeah.
Okay, but you can switch back and forth. And is that the case for anybody working at Here, or is it just certain groups of people? Depends on your manager.
Depends on your manager, I would say. That a lot of teams are flexible. So more and more of our teams are highly dispersed. So you would have everybody working wherever they are on the globe. So it doesn't matter if you're working from the office, if your whole team is in Chicago, Mumbai, Berlin, etc. We're actually starting some interesting projects in Mumbai, where we actually have about 4,500 people all in one location. And they're actually working on remote working for them, because you would think, well, that's the big time you would work together. But because of the time it takes, I don't know if you've ever been to Mumbai, but I love the traffic over there. It is crazy, but it's amazingly busy. And it takes them like an hour and a half to go from one side of the town to the other.
Oh my gosh.
So they're actually looking at remote working, not because of the remoteness of their work, but because of the time it takes to get to work and back is actually not effective. So it's the end result is still the same, but the reason for doing it is different.
Right. And I can imagine there's lots of cities. I mean, London, every time I go to London, I'm amazed at what people go through.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's for me the strange thing is that when I came over here, and I was looking for jobs. And they said, so, where do I live? Well, I live in Eindhoven, which is South Holland. Sorry, the south of Holland, because there's a district called South Holland. And then I was looking for jobs in Amsterdam and the Utrecht, which is, if I get on the train, it's about an hour to Utrecht, an hour and a half to Amsterdam. And most people said, why are you going that far? And I was like, far? That's like,
to like me, only an hour.
Yeah, I used to live in London 12, as the crow flies, between 9 and 12 miles, depending on what job I was going to. And if I was lucky, it would take me an hour and a half, door to door.
Wow.
But that's a normal journey, but I used to it. Sling my headphones on, webcasts, podcasts, videos. I'm a big film person. So I'd sing on a film or a TV series, and by the time I get to the other end, I've watched a film, and it's lovely.
Yeah, in a way, except for that it's forced. You have to do it every day.
That's but then you make the most of it. So right. I know it's going to be an hour and a half, and this is before remote working, so I know it's going to be an hour and a half. Well, let's make the most of it. Whereas now, especially in the Dutch culture, I know you probably experienced this as well, is that even just going to the other side of the town is quite a long distance. I can imagine for your American viewers that must be absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
because they go from state to state, let alone city to city. So
yeah, I used to think nothing of driving from Los Angeles to San Francisco. It was a 7-hour drive if you went pretty fast, and I thought nothing of it. I did it on the weekends. It was crazy. Here it's unheard of.
Yeah, I think that's the same as going probably to the other side of Europe.
Yeah, you could drive through Germany or get to Switzerland by that amount of time. Exactly. So yeah, it's just a different mindset of that.
Yeah.
But speaking of mindsets, I want to dive into what you're doing at Here Technology, which is you're a lead of learning and development. And clearly you've got this side hustle, the Neverending Learner. So it's all tied together, but you're pretty passionate about learning and developing learning cultures. How did that start? Where did that come from?
Now, I'm never going to say that I don't have unique views, I thought of that. And that's definitely not in this case. For me, I would say, and this is and one of the tips I talk about in my videos, is I started as a traditional L&D person. So face-to-face, and I love the classroom, and you can probably tell from my kind of enthusiasm stuff. Get me in front of a room and I'll be like, hey, kind of. For those people that are listening, I'm throwing my hands up. It's one of those. But when I started here, I know it's a joke that everybody uses. We started going to events, so expos in L&D, because we wanted to see, well, what's going on in this industry. And for those who are in Europe, there's a couple of big ones. The big one is the Learning Technologies in London around the start of February every year. I know there's a few in Chicago, I think in October every year. And I went along, and yes, you get to hear different talks and you walk around all the booths and stuff. But to me, the biggest thing was just seeing the vibe. First of all, seeing how many people are in L&D always astounds me, how many people are working in the L&D environment. And secondly, you get to kind of see what's going on and see what people are doing and what general the movement is. And I watched a couple of people, and they started talking about this thing called the learning culture. And I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting. And then I started reading up myself. So I was reading a few white papers, read a couple of books on it. And then I started to get my own connotations of it. So there isn't just one theory, we're not like maths, that there's one theory and then everybody else works on it. It's more an idea of how you want to do it. And to me, it's kind of evolved into this, what I call keeping ahead of the curve. So you talk about industries, and especially technology industries, moving so fast. And I'm not one of these people that kind of loves numbers and loves graphs and stuff, but I know that there are two graphs that I kind of use quite often. First of all is the Moore's the Moore's law curve, which is the exponential growth of technology. I think it used to be every 18 months technology quadruples, or the speed of I think it was the speed of processors quadruple.
Yeah.
But you could kind of equate that to other things in technology. And then you've got the learning bell, which is basically how quickly somebody learns and becomes excellent, or at least proficient at a particular thing. And if you overlap those two, they don't match up. So the idea is that by the time you learn something, it's already old hat. And so this keeping ahead of the curve is a kind of an explanation of how the learning culture I believe should be implemented by not just companies, but everybody. Individual mindsets, company mindsets, both big and small, to enable you as individuals and as companies to keep ahead of the curve.
Right. And so, and for companies, really, I guess for individuals and companies, the reason why you'd want to even keep ahead of the curve is, one, is you want to keep innovating to stay marketable, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you want to basically keep products that people need. So,
yeah, I mean, you've got two different ways of looking at keeping ahead of the curve. You've got, from the technology point of view, of always keeping one step ahead to keep innovating, but also from a mindset point of view in terms of learning, is that if you know that companies or technologies move forward so quickly, you need to have, how do I put this in a different way? I would say that it's, rather than just keeping up to date, it's more about the mindset of thinking, I need to be flexible. I need to be flexible in my skills. I need to be flexible in how I approach work and projects, so that I am ready for anything. And that will then, as a result, keep me ahead of the curve. I hope that makes a bit more sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because we don't know what's going to happen in life, and you can't plan on keeping in the same direction, because inevitably things are going to change. The way technology changes things, the work culture changes.
Exactly. I saw a report, I think it was last week, that said that they believe that around 35% of all jobs will go due to automation. But then 85% of the jobs that are going to be, I believe it was in 2035 or 2050, somewhere around there, will be brand new, as in they're not even a job now.
Right.
So the risk is there, the scariness is there, but also the opportunity is amazing of what potentially is there. I mean, I always use the example of the Industrial Revolution, that when the ladle, the automatic ladle, came along, everybody thought that there would be, everybody would go out of business, and there'd be no jobs. But then people turned away from using the loom, not the ladle, the loom. Thing was called the Jenny, and became mechanics. So learn how to fix them.
Yeah.
Same with the horses. If you go back to the even earlier, everybody thought that you can't get rid of horses, and then the cars came along. Again, I don't mean to go off on one, but I mean, the famous quote was from Ford, and they asked him, what do you see as why aren't you asking your customers what they want? And he said, well, if I ask my customers what they want, they'd want faster horses.
Right.
Not new cars.
Right.
So
Indeed.
Yeah. So I kind of divulge in these kinds.
No, but it's an interesting point, because people are afraid of their jobs being taken away by artificial intelligence or robots. And I'm just saying, well, it's actually the boring jobs that are being taken away.
It's the bit of the job you don't want to do.
Yeah. Right. It's the stuff you don't want to do anyway. And maybe there'll be way more interesting things that come along, and which I'm sure of. I mean, when I went to, I feel older now that I'm saying it this way, but when I went to college, what I'm doing today didn't exist.
Yeah.
When I was in school, there was not even a way to study this. I mean, maybe I could have gone into radio or something. I don't know, but podcasts weren't even there yet. Yeah, exactly. Yes, I've created my own Lisette hour.
Yeah.
The beauty of remote working. So, what is a bad learning environment at a company? I don't know if you could paint that picture for people.
I don't think there's such thing as bad learning. I'd say less effective is probably a better way of thinking about it.
Okay, so yeah, what are people doing when they're doing it wrong?
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
such
I
a no. It's a
know.
good question. I think let me kind of answer it in a slightly different. I feel like I'm going to be a politician here. I'll answer it by answering a different question. um,
Fine, divert.
yeah. No, but to me, it's the mindset of learning traditionally has been waiting for learning to happen to you. So you're waiting for a training or somebody like me to come along and say, right, everybody, we're going to train this. And that's not necessarily a bad thing to happen, because a lot of companies, you have to do that. You have to wait until the trainer gives you the information. But in this day and age, there is so much information and resources out there on many different topics that you can go out and find the information. I've interviewed many leaders, especially in our own company and outside of our company, about self-development. And there is a running theme, is every big leader is a terrible way of saying it, but every leader, the first thing they talk about is self-development. You hear people saying, I read 3 books a day, I keep up to date, I have Google alerts and all these different ways of doing it. But in a sense, what links them all together is that they don't wait. And I think if you go back to kind of what is bad learning is waiting for learning to hit you. Is you go out and find it. So I think we've talked before about MOOCs, mass open online courses. They are open to everybody and anybody. If you want it, you can find it. You can find free stuff, and not illegally. This is all legal. Articles, books, ebooks, all these kind of things.
Videos.
Yeah, exactly. YouTube is turning into a massive field of a useful knowledge rather than watching a cat play a piano.
I mean, we have a garden where we didn't know any of the plants because we inherited this garden from the previous owner, and it required, there were some things like an apple tree that we had, a grape tree that we had. We learned how to trim it and take care of it all from YouTube videos. I mean, it's a silly example, but it does show that you can go out like, here's something we needed knowledge. You have to cut apple trees in a particular way. Otherwise you ruin the tree. And wow, there's YouTube with our apple tree, our brand of apple tree, our climate, and somebody speaking our language telling us how to cut it. It's pretty amazing.
Exactly. And then I suppose the bad version of that would be you paying somebody to do it. And, a lot of people say, but, that grows economies and all that kind of stuff. But it is a different world that we're living in. It's a different economy. It's a much more speedy economy. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but it's that, and again, I don't mean to diverge into different things, but you see a lot of people talking about, we should stick to our we shouldn't lose these traditions and this tradition and that tradition. It's like, but things move on, the world changes, and there are going to be new traditions that people don't want to lose. I'm going to plug a book, not my book. I can never remember pronounce his name. He's from Israel, but it's his first book was Sapiens, his second book was Homo Deus, and it's an absolute world changer. If you want to know about kind of where the future is going, potentially, and I was reading it half like kind of in fear and half in bewilderment. It's a fascinating book. I'd highly recommend it to anybody and everybody.
I'll put it
and
in the
it does come
notes.
in Dutch.
Ah, for those for my couple hundred Dutch listeners out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's talk about what a good, how would you create, if you were giving advice to somebody who wanted to create a better learning culture in their companies, what would you say? What are some of the things to think about?
Well, first of all, have a look at my YouTube channel. No, I'm joking.
For sure. No, really. And I will be linking that into the show notes as well.
Well, I mean, I've only just started it and there's a few things on there, but...
Disclaimer for those listening. I know Toby personally. I can tell you that it's valuable information. So...
thank you. Yeah. But if I was to break it down nice and simply, and there's what I try and do with most people, is that there are three elements to a learning culture that kind of any individual, any company, big or small, can take, irrespective of platforms. And I know we've chatted about this in the past and stuff, and we can talk about it again. But in a sense, you've got self-developed learners. That's the absolute kind of key principle. And one of those key things is all about being curious. Now, I know we've talked on many times, and you've come on to our Spark sessions. And what we do in here is have sessions where we bring in experts like yourself, Lisette, to spark people into being curious about different elements and then allow them to be self-developed. Because you can't tell somebody, go be self-developed. You've got to give them the space. You've got to give them allow them to find their passion in their own way, etc., etc. So that's the first thing, self-developed, self-determination. The second pillar is all about the company themselves, but more importantly, the trainers, is to change their mindset into being from trainers to facilitators. One of the things I talk about in my videos is that I hate the word training. I'm actually trying to drop the word training from everything I do. It should be learning or development or both, because we're not training people anymore. We're helping them develop. We're helping them learn. We're facilitating other experts, so subject matter experts, into it. If we go back to this kind of keeping ahead of the curve, it's impossible, and I think you'll probably agree with me here, for people like us to keep ahead of all the information. I can imagine in the virtual world, there are so many things going on. You can keep an idea about it, but you can't be the expert in all areas.
Right.
And the same for me, with it, whether it be soft skills is maybe the one exception you can kind of keep because they're quite generic, but technical training, tools, process and stuff, it's easier to go find the expert, give them a bit of consultancy and a bit of guidance, and then let them be the voice, and you just guide them into the right audience. So that's kind of the second pillar. The third pillar is all about peer-to-peer sharing. We've recently used a platform called Kpoint, which I believe is a fantastic tool, but it's just me. I just love the way they do it. They're a video knowledge learning sharing platform. So they're not an LMS. It's basically YouTube, but in-house. But it allows anybody to create a video and then anybody to watch it. And again, I don't want to plug too many platforms. I know you use a lot of different platforms. But for me, the one thing I've loved about Kpoint is its search engine searches within videos, not just titles and descriptions. So you can really get to the heart to the matter. So that's the platform I love using. But the idea is it's knowledge sharing. And that could just be you have a social group that you allow people to allow their voice to be heard. I mean, that's all it is. It's allowing individuals to say, hey, I've got this new idea, or I've got this new way of doing a process, and you just let them have their voice. You don't pass them through filters and pass them through. You give them the trust to let them do it. Some people say that's a risk. I believe it's a risk we're taking.
And I mean, you have a global organization that you're working with. Has anybody ever abused the system? Yeah, they uploaded videos that were inappropriate, or I don't even know. I don't have.
Yeah, not at the moment. We obviously put in as many, not restrictions. We put in as much training as possible. We have, like diversity training and those kind of trainings to make sure that they don't try not to do it in the first place. Obviously, you have HR and your managers keeping an eye. So if they're a bit of a bad egg, then you kind of hopefully stop them from doing that kind of thing. But we also have processes in place where there's we can flag inappropriate stuff, and we have processes and going back to the automation, we use machine learning and AI to identify where problems could be, and that gets automatically flagged. So to give you an example, if we have a particular ISO process that cannot be broken, because that's what ISO say, that's the process. And you get some bright spark coming and going, I've got this great idea. Instead of doing that, you can do this. It's a great idea, but you can't, there's a process for a reason. Then we would have automatic flags that pop up to say, and then people will get pinged to say, this process, there's a video that's about this process. We're not sure what's in it. We just know that it's linked. Please review it. And then they can review it and take it down.
Right.
So there's ways to mitigate the risk.
Indeed. And it seems like there's bad consequences for risk or when people do inappropriate things, but it's so rare that I ever hear of it actually happening. I mean, I know it happens, and sometimes there's pranks gone wrong or jokes gone wrong and, that kind of a thing. But for the most part, people are genuinely there to learn and
then that's what I was going to say. It's about the root cause. And a lot of L&D people will always talk about finding the root cause, because they'll come to you and say, I need training. And you go, do you? Probably not. You actually need something else, but you think you need training. And it's the same. So if somebody's doing malicious stuff on an open platform, and that could happen on, we have Yammer, which is our kind of written conversational tool that you could have it on there. And we've had instances where our CEO has written something on Yammer and somebody's replied either as a joke or because they don't like what they've just heard, and replied in a not so friendly way. And that gets dealt with. But the underlying cause is that maybe they weren't engaged, maybe the communication wasn't done properly. Because I strongly believe at least, nobody wants to be bad. Nobody wants to badmouth other people. It's just you're put in a situation, your environment means that's your only way out. Or that's what you feel is the only way out.
Yeah.
It might just be that person was frustrated because his manager or her manager wasn't hearing that person. So that's why they took to Yammer.
Yeah, or it's 37 degrees outside and everybody's, people's tempers are short. And
I know they're just got dumped by their girlfriends or worse. There are so many things that could happen.
Yeah.
And so the risk is when you have these open platforms is that people can snap and abuse them, but they're few and far between, and you can't stop the majority just because of one or two, not idiots, but one or two people that abuse it.
Right. So let's go back to creating learning culture in companies.
Okay.
So we've got our three pillars: our self-developed learners, going from training to facilitation, and then peer-to-peer sharing. So those are sort of the three underlying structures in that. And I want to sort of break it down a little bit more. So in terms of self-developed learners, there are some people who are curious and some people who are not curious. I mean, like, for instance, my husband, we took these personality tests and curiosity went off the charts for him. And I do notice it now more that I know that about him. But every time we walk by something, he's like, oh, I wonder how that's built. Or, oh, I wonder why this is the way it is.
But that's not everybody.
Right, that's not everybody. So there are people out there that have higher levels of curiosity than others. There are people who like learning more than others.
But if I use your example, I can imagine that if there was a new, let's say, I don't know, some company announced a new tool that allows you to be a hologram in an office. Exactly. You'd be like, oh. Whereas your husband would be like, oh, God. No,
like, what wedding anniversary? There's a hologram. Yeah.
Exactly. And I can imagine your husband's going, what, a hologram? Yeah, and you're thinking Star Trek, and then you're thinking, oh, we could do this and do that. And to me, that's all about finding your passion. So it's going back to kind of what I originally said. You can't make people be self-developed. You give them, and I kind of like talking about building a house. You can either build a house for somebody and go, there you go, there's your house. Or you can give them a plot of land. You can give them a solid foundation. You can give them some guidance about how to build the walls, and probably more importantly, how to build the roof, and go knock yourself out. And the great thing is that, I mean, I know they do that in the Netherlands quite a lot. They kind of build these kind of open plan houses where you can pretty much do whatever you want internally. Is that on the outside, it's nice and uniformed. So from an organizational point of view, everybody's in line, everybody is kind of aiming to the same targets because everything looks beautiful. Take Amsterdam. Most of the houses are very symmetry kind of thing. They're all the same. So canals can go, the boats can go up and down and people can get to work and all that kind of stuff. But if you go into any one of those houses, every single one is different. And it's because they allowed their own curiosity and their own kind of way they feel to be set free. And that's what I'm talking about. It's not saying you should be self-developed. It's you give them the environment to be curious, and I strongly believe people will take that and in the right direction.
Okay, yeah, and I like that. I like that view, and great analogy, actually, great metaphor. So how would you then make an environment to enhance curiosity like that? What are some of the things you've done it here?
Some of the things that we're doing, I'd say it's not a finished product, but anyway, means it's always going to be an ongoing thing. So the first thing is what we talked about, these spark sessions. So it's a lot of people in the industry call them nudge training, where and I refer to it as like, have tugboats. You get these massive liners that can move very slowly. And then you have these little tugboats kind of just nudging them in the right direction. So they're going, but they're kind of drifting the right way. So we have not trainings, but we have talks very similar to TED Talks, TEDx Talks, where we get people that are passionate, just like yourself, Lisette, that talk about an area, and that we hope then will then spark people's curiosity to go off and find their information. So that's one thing we do. Another thing is that we have a lot of resources available and easily available. So we've brought in what used to be lynda.com is now LinkedIn Learning. So every here employee has LinkedIn Learning, free access to tens of thousands of content from every single topic you can think of. But it is generic, it's not bespoke. We give them access to MOOCs, these mass open online courses, so Coursera, edX, Udemy, to name just a few. We don't have them built into the system, but we have them resourced so we can say, go and find these things. Mm-hmm. If it's a particular topic, say of product management, we have resources, we have articles, we have books, all pointing them in so that it's easy to find. We have these, what we call one-stop shops. So basically, if you want to find everything you need to know about product management, you can jump into this SharePoint site and it will have links to LinkedIn Learning, it will have links to MOOCs, it will have links to articles, links to books, links to the social platforms, so Yammer, so they can see what conversations are going on, links to our internal stuff, so all our roadmaps and all that kind of stuff. So they've got it all in one place. So it makes it easy for somebody to be curious without having to spend hours finding all the information. So I can imagine on your website, your tips and tricks, you must have spent a long time putting that together. But for me to go onto it, it's nice and simple.
Yeah, the art is creating something simple for people to find the information that they need to look for. Right.
Yeah. So that's what we're trying to, in one of the ways we're doing it. And the other way is to create videos and create, I suppose, videos, interviews of getting leaders, getting SMEs to get their knowledge and show people how important it is to be self-developed, how they did it, because a lot of people learn by seeing what other people have done, not by doing it themselves. And so there's many different ways that we try and get people to be curious. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's really good. So I've written down that you host these nudge trainings on various topics. You do these every month?
The Spark sessions are at least every month, yeah.
Okay, at least every month. You've got easily available resources, so really a big resource library where you're pointing people in the right direction. MOOCs, these massive online courses, and then videos and interviews that you supply people on various subjects.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a lot of resources available. Now, before we started, we were talking about how a lot of companies buy these huge platforms where you can
learning experience platforms.
Right. And I think like cross knowledge is maybe one of them, and I don't know what some of the other popular ones.
Yeah, I mean, well, you've got Cornerstone is basically the biggest and baddest of the lot, but they're more a traditional LMS, is learning management system. The next generation is called LXPs, learning experience platforms, and what they do. So an LMS, I call it a dumping ground. I know it's not a dumping ground, but I kind of, it's simply a place where learning takes place. So you put for those who are in L&D know what a SCORM file is. It's basically an e-learning module that allows you to interact with it and links and all that kind of stuff. So there is basically you can take an e-learning and kind of that's about it. An LXP allows you to not only do the learning, but it incorporates machine learning. So chatbots will kind of pop up and say, oh, you've taken this course, so you'll probably like this course. And your colleague in your same level likes this, so you also may like this. Also things like it will come up and say, I see you took a learning last week. Was it good? Did you enjoy it? What did you ask from it? So it's not an interactive, but it's reminders. Then it will embed the social learning element of it. So I strongly believe that you actually learn more from the social elements rather than from the actual knowledge itself, because it's actually taking information from other people. And it brings in MOOCs and different areas. So it's like an umbrella of experience and very much personal and bespoke to you. But getting back to your point in terms of kind of why these platforms are about is, I'm not saying they're bad. So I want to kind of start off with saying they're not a bad thing. It's just I believe that people who buy them are buying them too early. And again, I don't mean any disrespect to anybody that's bought, because they are very expensive and they're very useful. But one thing they don't help with, or at least can't help as detailed with, is the mindset. You need to get the mindset right first, these kind of pillars that I've been talking about. And once you get that in place, the platform is then a lovely add-on. It's a lovely place then to organize all your thoughts and everything. But you can't just, and this is a mistake so many companies make, is they release a new platform, go, yay, we've got this. And then it kind of falls apart. I'm going to give you an example of our company, not saying they made a mistake. But when we released Yammer, we had nothing like it before that. We didn't have any time where you could communicate with each other online. It was emails, and that was it. So they launched it and said, look how great, they've got this lovely new platform. And they kind of did a bit of training. But what they missed was that, why are we doing this? Why do you need this kind of element? And going back to that kind of house analogy, is that they just gave us the house and said, there you go. And they didn't kind of say, well, here are some walls, here is the roof, here's the foundation, here are where you could put your rooms, here are some ideas. Now let's kind of help each other. They just kind of left people to it. And what we found is that a lot of people don't use Yammer in this company. A lot of people have either turned it off or just very sparingly use it, because they're just, it's not being, you know what I mean? It's not being built into their habits.
Yeah, well, they don't know why it's supposed to help them in some ways, right? Like
they just see it as another tool, another way for our company to tell you what you're doing wrong.
Right. But if people are already used to working the way they're working, even if it's clunky, even if it's a little bit painful, it's still, I mean, you see this all the time in conference rooms with spider phones still, right? Yeah. It's like, it works. It's way better than nothing. It's better than not communicating. It's better than not having that person in the meeting, but man, it could be so much better.
Yeah. And the key thing is about, so I believe in social learning, and I would kind of I would beg my company to get similar kind of tools if we didn't have them. But one of the things that I would need to do is take me out of the equation and think, well, what does the average Joe need and why is it good for them? Because what am I trying to say? The mindset it's very hard for somebody that is already got the mindset to think of people that don't. And I always put that leaders have this struggle in general, not particularly here, but I think in general, people that are already self-developed, people that already have that mindset of this is a good thing, struggle, will wonder why the company is struggling or other people are struggling. And they say, oh, there's loads of information out there. But what they don't realize is that you have to kind of give a lot of people a bit of structure, a bit of kind of why you should be doing it, how you're doing it, and then kind of let them find their own route. And it's a struggle that I think, and it's not anything leaders are doing wrong. It's just, you talk to a leader and they say, how important is self-development? They go, oh God, it's so important, and I do it all the time. And then you ask them, so how do you make other people self-developed? And they go, they just should be.
Right. Why wouldn't they do it?
Yeah, exactly. I do it. It's easy. Like, yeah, do you find it easy? But
it's another mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also people are busy with their jobs. So, so there's like, hey, I've got my work that I've got to get done. And you want me to be this learner, and you want me to know all the tools, and I'm supposed to innovate. Like, man, I got to go pick my kids up. And
it's such an important point, because part of the learning culture is basically saying, we're not going to give you the training. You have to find it out yourself. But then a lot of people, like I said, busy people already got all their day work. And then we're saying, in between all that, go off and do a MOOC for an hour and a half.
Right. Come to this Spark session and listen to this expert. And they're like, oh man, I've got this task list.
Exactly. My priorities, like I had a conversation with my colleagues yesterday about Toastmasters. It's a great organization if your listeners haven't heard of it. It allows a safe space for people to practice both their presentation skills, but also their feedback skills, because they're both as important. And we were talking about a Toastmasters event. And one of the things Toastmasters have done is they've gone online. So it used to be that to progress through the Toastmasters peers, you had a book and you actually had to kind of physically read the book. Now it's all online. And it kind of, you say, if you want to watch the e-learning, knock yourself out. And one of my colleagues said, I don't have the time. I've got meetings to do and all that kind of stuff. And I just turned around to him. I was a bit annoyed, I must admit. And I said, so you're prioritizing your work over your learning? He said, no, I don't have the time. It's like, if you felt your self-development was important, you'd prioritize that. And it's true. I mean,
we all have the same number of hours in the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a recent father, and I must admit it's been a bit of a struggle. My wife knows, we've had a bit of a struggle in terms of not health or anything, but just kind of getting into the rhythm of being a father and stuff. And she quite rightly said, because I'm used to, maybe it's a London thing of like, just you work, you work and work and work until the product's done. In the Netherlands, it's very much you work at 5 and you go home.
Yeah.
And that was a struggle for me. And she said, it's all about your priorities. What do you prioritize, your work or your new family? I'm like, you got a good point.
Well, when you put it that way.
Yeah, but I never thought of it as prioritized. I just thought it's like I'm doing work. But now that since she told me that, I'm like, you're absolutely right. So now I do now stop at, not necessarily at 5 o'clock, but I kind of now consciously make that difference.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could talk for hours about. I have a new kind of training that I do about habit breaking and conscious and unconscious and stuff, but I won't go into it. But it's watch this space for kind of my next.
Yeah, I'll be linking to the YouTube channel where people can subscribe. And we've definitely run out of time. But I really want to ask you one more thing. No, it's jam packed. I have a whole notebook full of notes here. So, but I want to talk about virtual trainings, because as part of the Spark session, you taught me a few things about how to do trainings online that make them more engaging.
I tried.
And so I wanted to, because I still see to this day, all the webinars that I attend, It's just a voice and some slides, and the slides are full of bullet points with like 8-point font. And basically the speaker is just reading me a slide for an hour.
Yeah, you
or
could have
a
just
series
sent
of
me that.
slides.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and usually if I sign up for a webinar, I'm watching it live. But if I were watching a video, I 2.5 times it, like, let's get this party started. I've got things to do. And it's just sort of the wrong way of doing online training. So what can we do? What can we do to make it better?
So, I mean, again, I could talk for hours on this, but to keep it
You got 2 minutes.
Oh, God. So very simply, first of all, it's putting engagement into e-learning, virtual learning, webinars for the benefit of the viewer, not because you want somebody to learn something. So I actually don't like gamification. I actually hate it because it turns trainers into laziness. And I get a lot of stick for that. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who go, what does he know? Because to me, is that all gamification does is make a training. So there's your training. You add in a bit of quiz or something, and that's supposed to make the training better. Why don't you just make this bit better and more engaging? Then you don't need this bit. So the things you can do to make it better is make it interactive. So like we sat down and worked through your talk, and so things like remove slides, have it some of it that just you, and remove the slides. Turn on annotation. I think Zoom does annotation. I'm not sure if it does.
Yeah, it does.
It does. Cool. So WebEx does. I know a lot. I think GoToMeeting. I think all of the tools do annotation, but learn how to use annotation so it allows you to kind of draw circles around things. And we use
everybody can. Right?
Yeah,
like every attendee can, right? So we had everybody, like, for instance, so that people can visualize this, we had an opening slide that said, hey, we're going to be starting the session in 5 minutes or whatever the time was. Please say hello using the annotation. And people went nuts.
It was crazy.
People had various languages. They drew on other people's pictures. I mean, I was amazed at how many people were actually paying attention and doing something creative.
Yeah, and I must admit, I'm not going to take credit for inventing that. But what I've done, and going back to your question about how did I get these ideas, is that I basically went to these events, but I went to other webinars and basically watched them and go, oh, I like that bit. I'll nick it, and I'm going to use that, but also adapt it. So they used annotation a different way. I go, oh, but if I use it and I could do it this way and I could do it that way. So you kind of build on those ideas. So that's kind of one way, is to make it more engaging, not just by putting in a poll or something, but think of different ways that you can make it. And maybe think of, like, how would I do this face-to-face? And what could that look like in a virtual environment? So I think we talked about the fact that icebreakers, in a face-to-face event, you get somebody standing up and doing an icebreaker. You can still do that virtually. And one of the things I do is I do hand gestures. So if I want to do an icebreaker with you, it's like, I want you to say hello, where you're from, and give me a hand gesture. Not a rude one, but a hand gesture. And it could be like, I've done like, and then what you do is then
like
you get everybody,
hands.
Everybody recreates that, and you get everybody kind of doing weird things. I've seen your virtual parties and stuff, where you put on music and dance stuff. There's many different ways you can do it. But the only other thing I wanted to add to that is you mentioned about the videos afterwards, the recordings afterwards. And this is one thing that I've tried to get more and more of these companies to do, is that rather than just take a webinar as a standard recording and then dump it on a site somewhere and go, there you go. There's nothing worse than listening to other people fumble around saying, oh, hello, is my audio on? And doing interactive exercises when you're not there. It is the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, you're just
so what I do, exactly, it's like, I'm sitting there for 5 minutes waiting for somebody to draw a picture, which is great if you're actually drawing it, but I don't care. Right. So with your videos, I think ours was about an hour long. I then spent a bit of time cutting up the videos, cutting out the annotation areas, because that doesn't matter to an online person, and making it nuggets, or some people call them micro learning. We call them nuggets. It doesn't matter. You're breaking it up and you're thinking, what would be useful now to the recorded audience, to my non-live audience? Because there's two different audiences there.
Yeah.
And to me, that would be my kind of last point, is to think not just to your laziness, or my laziness, not your laziness, my laziness as a trainer is what's useful for my learner, my audience, and then pitch to them.
Brilliant way to end this, which is one of the things that I learned from Zig Ziglar was that whenever you're making sales or whenever you're doing something for something, you have to listen to WIIFM radio.
Yeah, I will tune into WeFM.
Radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really, because when you say something like join my webinar, nobody cares about your webinar. What they care about is what are you going to get when you join the webinar. So you could say like 20 tips for better virtual learning and not join my webinar. I mean, that's, so you always have to speak in what's in it for them.
When I was advertising your one to our in-house audience, it wasn't like, come join Lisette. They're like, who?
Yeah, who's Lisette? Yeah.
But
no, I mean, no.
But it's like, you ever wondered what tools are out there for virtual learning? You ever wondered how you can improve your experience with your highly diverse colleagues? And I'm like, well, yeah. And so if you want to find more, come join us.
Right.
I think I learned that, God, I must have learned that about 15 years ago. I heard, and I thought, boom, that just clicked me. And from evermore, I've always said, tune into WeFM.
Yeah, it's I only heard it a few years ago, but I wish I'd heard it 15 years ago because it's helped my marketing in a significant.
But again, I never say I come up with these things. It's always just I've found it.
Steal and tweak.
Yeah,
Steal and tweak. Yeah, that's
it sounds
innovation.
like a new dance move.
Yeah, totally. We could come up with a new steal and tweak dance. So for those who are listening, we're
doing super things.
So because it's more fun virtual. Okay, so I've kept you on way too long already, but thank you so much for all the information you've given today. One final question is, if people want to learn more about you, what's the best way to find you? LinkedIn,
easiest way. I think it's like you LinkedIn/IN/the Neverending Learner. So.
And I'll link to it in the show notes also. So people who are listening, don't worry, it's all there. But yeah, definitely link.
Yeah, there's a link to my TEDx talk on there. There's a link to my YouTube videos. If you want to see me on YouTube, it's just the Neverending Learner. If you Google search that, that will come up as well. So yeah.
Great. So we'll make that easy to find. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Until next time, everybody, be powerful.
Thank you very much.